Before you ever think about picking up a hitchhiker, or even accepting a ride from a stranger, remember these 3 stories. Each one begins ordinary, then bends toward a choice, and finally lands on a lesson you will not forget. These are not tales designed only to scare you, they are small mirrors of real decisions people make on dark roads, in quiet parking lots, in the middle of the night. They show how kindness can save and how trust can be misplaced. They show how quick thinking can pull someone back from the edge, and they show how one split second can change everything. Listen with your eyes open, and with the part of you that pays attention to the small details. Each story has a voice, and each voice will ask you a question you may not want to answer. Do you stop to help, or do you keep driving? Choose wisely. This one was told to me by an old family friend named Nikki, so many times that her voice braided into the memory of the story itself. She told it like someone holding a small, shining object, warning you not to drop it. She said it had happened when she was in her mid-20s, in an era of rotary phones and map books, sometime in the early 1980s. She grew up in a small town where people still left their doors unlocked, and where a wave of a hand could settle an argument. That upbringing shaped a woman who believed in helping others without asking too many questions. On an ordinary afternoon, she was making a 2-hour drive into the city. The sky was the thin blue of late summer, the highway cut through fields and occasional stands of trees, and the radio hummed in the background with some song she could not name. She spotted a figure walking along the shoulder, thumb up, the classic hitchhiker silhouette. The car moved over, she slowed, and instinct took over. She pulled into a gravel patch and opened the passenger door. He climbed in with a polite, embarrassed sort of smile. He looked younger than his voice suggested, hair a little uneven, shoes scuffed, a small duffel at his feet. They exchanged the small talk of strangers, the kind of conversation that fills miles and softens time. He asked if she could stop at a diner halfway to the city. She said yes and treated him to a sandwich. He ate like a person who had been hungry for a long time, but he paid the bill with a note that thanked her, and then they were back on the road, the city skyline growing ahead like a faint tooth on the horizon. At the downtown exit he asked for her number, explaining he would need a ride again as he did not have a car at the moment. She wrote it down on a napkin and handed it to him, the scribbled digits a tiny, tangible promise that she had done something kind and received gratitude in return. When he stepped away into the crowd she felt that warm glow people describe when they help another human. A week later the phone rang. Nikki answered like any normal person, expecting perhaps another invitation for coffee or a caller ID she did not know. The voice at the other end was quick and nervous, and then the words came in a way that made the room colder. "You should thank God you were raised kind," the man said. "When I got in your car, I planned to rape and murder you at that pit stop. Then I was going to steal your car and dump your body in a ditch." He paused like he wanted her to understand the gravity of the confession, then added, "But after you treated me with kindness and smiled at me, I couldn't do it. I couldn't live with myself after that." He ended by telling her to never pick up a hitchhiker again, then he hung up. When she tried to call back the number it went to a payphone. The shock in Nikki's voice when she told me this was not about physical harm, at least not directly. It was about the knowledge that a life had been held in the balance by something as simple as a friendly smile. She felt gratitude and fear braided together, and the lesson was precise. Her kindness had saved her, but it could just as easily have put her in danger, depending on the person. There are roads where a good deed is exactly that, a good deed. There are other roads where that same good deed could be the hinge on which a life opens or closes. When she told me this story she would pause, look straight at whoever she was telling, and say, "People always think they are impervious. Kindness is a strength, but it is not armor. It does not stop someone who intends harm almost always, but sometimes it does. You can never know which it will be. So if you want to help, find safe ways to help. Call an ambulance. Call the police. Offer money, a map, a call, but not always a backseat." That night I thought about my own small acts of kindness and how they sometimes looked like foolishness. The truth in Nikki's story is not meant to sow paranoia into your chest. It is a reminder that the world contains both warmth and cruelty, often sitting in the same car. It is a reminder that our choices matter, that a smile can change more than one life, and that the safest kind of help is the kind that keeps both people alive. Years later I would pass the same stretch of road Nikki had described, and the memory of her voice would flatten the landscape into something sharp. I never picked up a hitchhiker after that, not because I lost goodness, but because I learned to channel it differently. I carry blankets in my trunk now, water bottles, a jumper pack, and a list of local shelters. If I see someone in need, I will offer them a ride to a public place, or I will call a local service, or I will stop and stay within sight of my car. That small change in habit is a tribute to Nikki's afternoon, the moment when a human mind paused and chose another path. This one is told in a voice that sits closer to my own mouth, because it is mine. I have one regret about hitchhiking, and it is that I did not listen to the voice in my gut. It was a Saturday night in New Jersey, around 1 in the morning. Route 542 is the kind of road that eats sound, a long ribbon through woods where the only light comes from your headlights and the occasional moon. The sky was low, cloudless, the kind of night that sharpens shadows into black knives. I was alone in my Jeep, headlights bright, the off-road lights cutting a path through the darkness. Then I saw him on the shoulder, thumb extended, a dark figure in a gray hoodie. He looked thin and a little lost, the kind of person you imagine on the edge of a story. My heart tightened. I debated for a mile or two. Stopping felt like the right thing, the humane thing. Not stopping felt like cowardice. Against my better judgment, and against a small voice that said just keep driving, I pulled over. He climbed in awkwardly, like a man uncertain of the rules. When he tried to close the door it did not latch properly. I told him to slam it because Jeeps seal tight, and the way he moved had that slight delay of someone not accustomed to quick motions. He gave off a kind of nervous energy that set my teeth on edge. For a breath I told myself I was being paranoid, then the road swallowed us and the trees rushed past. We drove in silence for a while. He looked out the window like someone searching for a place he could disappear into. Then he spoke in a voice that was softer than I expected. I have been wondering if it is even worth it to keep living. Those words can land like a physical blow. I tried to respond with something adult and helpful, the kind of phrases counselors use, but he did not want talk, he wanted to show me something. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a red-handled knife. My hands went cold. He explained, in a voice that was more factual than emotional, that he had been carrying the knife for weeks, waiting for the right time to do something final. He said it with a kind of quiet that made my insides rigid. I told him to put it away, said maybe we should turn around, but he asked me to pull over by a sign up ahead. We stopped, and he began cutting at his arm. The sight of the blade, the wet dark of blood on his skin, was a shock, a nausea that made the world tilt. He told me to get out, said he wanted to show me something behind the sign. I could have refused and stayed put, but he had the knife and he seemed unsure in a way that hinted at volatility. I remember doing the most human thing I could think of in that moment. I pretended to cooperate. I opened the door, stepped out slowly, and when he came around the Jeep to move me, I slammed my door, jumped back in, and drove away before he could react. The drive home was a blur of breaths and shaking hands. Every small sound was amplified, the engine a drum in my chest. When I finally reached my driveway 10 minutes later I sat for a long time in the car, staring straight ahead. I think of that night often, not so much for the fear as for the lesson. First, the lesson about gut instincts, they are often the only clean, honest thing you have in the dark. Second, the lesson about presence. People can walk alongside death for days, maybe weeks, and smile like everything is normal. You can never tell who is carrying what. What haunts me most is how close the world came to tipping. It would have taken a single different decision, a single second when I moved slow instead of fast, and the ending could have been written differently. I replay the scene in my head sometimes, the smell of pine, the flare of the Jeep lights, the dull metallic glimpse of the blade. It is a memory that rewires the way I see the road. Since then I made rules for myself that I still follow. I do not pick people up on empty roads. I keep the doors locked when I stop. If someone looks like they could be harmful, I keep driving. If someone looks hurt, I call for help. The boundary between help and harm is small, and caution is a kindness you can give to both yourself and the stranger. If there is a small mercy in my story, it is that the man did not harm me. Maybe the light of the Jeep, maybe my visible reaction, maybe a thought in him that bent the moment into another shape, saved us both. Maybe he did not want to die either. Maybe the knife was less intended for violence against others and more a weapon against the dark inside him. That does not make his actions less dangerous. People are complicated organisms of need, and sometimes their needs frighten the people who try to answer them. After that night, I found myself watching other drivers, wondering about the choices they made under different lights. I learned that compassion does not have to equal physical proximity. I can leave water on a porch, or call a number, or slow down and not stop. Helping does not always mean opening the door, sometimes it means learning to hand help across a distance. This is the one I have thought about the most when I find myself walking along dimly lit roads, or when I see taillights vanish into the distance. It happened the summer after I turned 16. I had finally gotten my first car, a 1999 Toyota Camry, and it felt like a spaceship. That night my friend Alex invited me to a big party in a small house out in the woods of Virginia. The music was loud, the bonfire was bright, and the air tasted like beer and pine. Alex and his girlfriend Brianna drove us there. They were both older than me by a small amount, and in that way the world felt bigger and more adult when they were in the car with me. At midnight, Brianna got a call about a family emergency and had to leave. Alex promised we would find another ride home. As the night thinned and people started leaving in small knots, I realized I had been drinking and my balance was not what it used to be. By 2 a.m. I was alone, and Alex was nowhere to be found. People had already left. I tried calling him from the host's phone, but after 2 attempts I gave up. The road out was long and dark, a 2-lane that threaded through trees. I started walking. After 15 minutes, I saw headlights behind me. Relief was a physical thing that made my shoulders drop. I stuck out my thumb and the car slowed. It was a faded blue 1999 Ford Explorer. The man behind the wheel asked where I was heading. I said my house was just a few miles down the road, and I climbed in. I must have passed out within minutes. When I woke up, the car was not on the road I knew. My throat tightened. I sat up, feeling sick and vulnerable. The man smiled, but it was not a small, friendly smile. It was a smile that had a calculation behind it. He asked, in a tone that treated me like a problem to be solved, what I was doing out this late. I told him I wanted to go home. He said, flatly, that would not happen. I told him to let me out anywhere, but he shook his head and said no. My heart pounded so loud I thought he could hear it. I started to gag. I could feel the slick burn of alcohol in my mouth and my head swam. It felt like a moment was stretching forever. Then, as crude as it sounds, I found an escape in the most human and disgusting way possible. I leaned forward and vomited, throwing up on his lap. The sound of it, the sudden mess, was a small weapon born of panic and humiliation. He shouted in disgust, swearing and cursing, and that 2 seconds was all I needed. I unlatched the door, bolted out, and ran into the woods. I moved without thinking of branches, thorns, or my shoes. The woods swallowed sound and my feet pounded hard on loose roots. He came after me with a flashlight, trained the beam in broad sweeps, missing me by inches more than once. I could hear the rasp of his breath and the crunch of leaves under his boots. After some time he went deeper into the woods, searching in the wrong direction. When his light filtered past me and then away, I crept back to the road and waited until a car came. I waved it down, breathless and shaking. The driver listened to my stammered explanation and then drove me home. When I got home I woke my parents. They were furious and frightened in the shape only parents can be. We called the police. My father wanted a license plate, a name, something to hold on to, but I had been too frightened to look carefully at his face or the numbers on the back of the Explorer. The little details blended into the fear. The police took a report. My father sat in the living room and stared into nothing for a long time, the kind of stare that says he had imagined the worst and then escaped it by a hair. I never saw Alex again after that summer. He stopped answering messages, he moved away, and his slow disappearance became another mystery. For a long time I blamed him for leaving, and I also blamed myself for getting into a stranger's car in the first place. The memory of headlights on the shoulder is one that lives inside me like an ache. It crept into other parts of my life, making me cautious at parties, careful about who I trusted, and hyper-aware of exits. The lesson I took from that night is messy. There are no clean morals sometimes, no golden rule that resolves everything. I learned that vulnerability is not an invitation, that fear can make people cruel, and that quick thinking can be a literal lifesaver. Vomiting on the lap of a stranger is hardly heroic, but it was a refusal. It was a boundary I drew with my body when my voice failed. It was messy and ugly and effective. If someone had not been driving by, if the man had been more alert, or if the party had been in a different place, the outcome could have been worse. After that summer I grew up faster than I wanted to. I learned to keep small bills in my pocket, to note license plates, and to have a plan for leaving places with people I could not trust. I learned to look for exits and to make sure someone knew where I was. I learned how to call for help, and how to trust my own instincts even when they feel paranoid. The night taught me to measure kindness against context. If someone is clearly intoxicated and alone, the safest aid is a cab or a friend, not always a back seat. Epilogue, reflections, and lessons. 3 stories, 3 different nights, 3 different roads. They share a thread. Each tale begins with a small human decision, the moment when someone decided to stop. Each one ends with a lesson that is not wrapped in neat packaging. There is no single moral that can be applied to every situation. The world is not divided into safe roads and dangerous roads. It is a mosaic of choices and consequences. From Nikki I learned that kindness can be a life raft for someone who has already decided not to be a monster, and sometimes it is the lifeline that keeps someone from becoming one. Her story taught me to widen the definition of help. Let someone use your phone, give them money, offer to drive them to a public place, but avoid putting yourself in a closed space with someone you do not know. From my night on Route 542 I learned that the voice inside you that says do not stop may be the truest voice you have. Intuition often stitches together 1,000 small facts your conscious mind has not assembled yet. If something feels wrong, it probably is wrong in a way your body recognizes before your head does. From the party night I learned that vulnerability is not weakness, it is a human condition. I learned to plan for the things that can go wrong when the music gets loud and the lights go down. I learned that courage takes many shapes, some dignified and some not. The way we rescue ourselves can be clumsy, and that does not make it any less brave. If you are the kind of person who wants to help, keep doing it. The world needs people willing to be kind. But do it with eyes open and safety in mind. Keep your phone charged, keep your car in good working order, carry a flashlight, and know where the nearest open business is. If you can, pick a public place to stop, like a gas station. If you are alone, call your friend and put them on speaker when you stop, let them hear the voice in the background. If someone asks for a ride to a hospital or shelter, offer to call an ambulance or a taxi instead. There are also things to teach the person asking for help. If you find yourself on the side of the road, remember that kindness has limits. Try to move to a well-lit area, attract the attention of businesses or other people, and keep a polite distance. If you are intoxicated, call a friend, or take a cab. If you must accept a ride from someone you do not know, try to sit in the back seat, keep your phone visible and ready, and note the license plate before you get in. These are awkward conversations to have, but they are practical ones. Finally, remember that fear is a useful tool. It is an alarm designed to keep you alive. It is not always polite, but it is functional. Treat it like a friend that sometimes nags you into safer choices. Combine your sense of compassion with a measure of prudence, and your acts of kindness will not have to come at the cost of your safety. These 3 stories are warnings, but they are not commands to live in fear. They are reminders that the world is complicated, that some people will meet your kindness with gratitude, and some will meet it with predatory calculation, and some will meet it with their own private despair. In every case, your choices matter. If you ever find yourself on a dark road, or walking home from a party, or looking at a person with a thumb extended, ask yourself a simple question: what is the safest way to help? Sometimes the answer will be to stop, sometimes it will be to call for help, and sometimes it will be to keep driving. There's a responsibility that comes with kindness, a responsibility to keep both yourself and others alive. Keep that responsibility close to your heart, and let it guide the small decisions that, in the end, make all the difference.